Imagine the year is 1884. It's the dawn of the opening of the Grand Salon in Paris. A very nervous young artist of 26 years old, who for the past 7 years had been the darling of the Salon at its yearly openings, will be showing his latest effort, and he is pacing about because the vernissage inaugural will open its doors to the new exhibit viewings in earnest. It is the private affair for special guests and artists to make a final but preliminary look at their artwork on display before opening day. John Singer Sargent was assured by his mentor and now colleague Carolus Duran, assures he has nothing to fear because his portrait will be well liked. Carolus had been invited to his studio for a final verdict. But it will shake the world of art to the core. A scandal is about to unfold. We want to investigate why and how it all happened. Our story begins. There was an American-born socialite living in Paris who was considered as a shining star in certain circles and a leading fashion queen of sorts for her outfits and flair. Her social status was of the upper hierarchy in London and Paris, which made her an object of special attention. So it was that, at a social event, the very young John Sargent met her. The year was 1881. The painter was instantly struck by her charms, and was keenly interested to make further acquaintance, and even of the hope to paint her portrait. Sargent's boldness to begin the process of making further contact with her through mutual friends was derived from his successes as one of the most promising artists to emerge in recent years. The portrait of his mentor, Carolus Duran, was an instant success, and subsequent triumphs, like El Jaleo, were lauded as masterpieces in previous showings, so his confidence was at high pitch to add more successes to his fame. He was already commanding large sums of money for his portrait work, where a full length would command 8,000 francs and 5,000 for a half length. Sargent was also a regular at evenings, where several of the Impressionists attended, and became close to Monet. Thus, at the age of 26, Sargent, an American, was being hailed in Paris as the author of the 2 outstanding pictures of the Salon. If it be true that art knows no nationality, the same might have been said, at any rate in 1882, of the American, for here was a foreign artist, little more than of age, measuring himself beside the established favourites of Paris, beside Carolus Duran, Bouguereau, and Dagnon Bouverie, Bastien Lepage, Besnard, Boldini, and the Impressionists, and being acclaimed as the most successful painter of the year. Sargent now begins his quest to find how to propose the idea of painting a portrait of Madame Gautreau, which now he believes that this could very well be a portrait of consequence for his career, so he contacts his mutual friend Del Castillo with the hope he would be able to make the necessary arrangements, stating to him, "When you are in Paris, tell her of my plans," and he expresses it thusly: "You might tell her that I am a man of prodigious talent. My interest to paint her portrait would be for the Salon, where I have had many successes over the past few years. This would not be by way of a commission." Madame Gautreau consents to posing for the prodigious talented young artist, and noted that several others have offered to paint her portrait that she was not obliged to do. However, by 1883 the sittings begin, and as is common among portrait artists, the challenge is not to waste too much time in looking for the right expression. But as the events unfold, it becomes apparent to Sargent she is a restless target. He sends off letters to his friend Miss Vernon Lee, at which he begins his frustration to paint her. He writes, "In a few days I shall be back in Paris, tackling my other envoi, the portrait of a great beauty. Do you object to people who are fardes, to the extent of being a uniform lavender or blotting paper colour all over? If so, you would not care for my sitter, but she has the most beautiful lines, and if the lavender or chlorate of potash lozenge colour be pretty in itself, I should be more than pleased." In another correspondence he writes, still in the country house struggling with the unpaintable beauty and hopeless laziness of Madame Gautreau. Sargent spends many hours sketching, changing poses, sometimes in a casual setting looking out of a window, as pictured here, or lounging upon a sofa, which is all part and parcel for the artist to loosen up, as it were, so he can rest upon the final idea he has in mind. One of the brilliant oil sketches he paints is one with the outstretched arm. The skilful modelling seems simple enough, with the soft light flowing over the forms, but again it's deceiving, because Sargent is a master of form, as one can see. This is most difficult to render with simplicity, yet anatomically well studied. Sargent is the persistent draftsman, and he relies on that skill to establish the idea to pencil and paper, which includes watercolour. As we expressed in earlier presentations, it is his keen reliance on watercolour and the use of brush with washes that he gains the fluency that transfers over to his oil painting. It combines most eloquently the all-embracing lightness of touch with methodical deftness. After much anguish of decision-making, Sargent settles on a format that is straightforward. It will be a full length with the addition of a table. His pose for Madame Gautreau, while similar to so many an artist's attempts at a full-length female portrait, differs dramatically in several ways, as we shall see in the portraits to follow. That Sargent is not sentimental, the soft and stoic portraiture by some of the best artists of the day are similar in character. They look to give a softer and more elegant side, where the emphasis is on high finish and technical achievement, as taught by the école system in general. Sargent from the start has already put into his thinking a version for her portrait that is powerful in its linear design from head to toe. The confidant glance of Gautreau in a profile silhouette further strengthens the less sentimental touch from other works. She is painted as an icon or statuesque Greek sculpture with the same authority of execution. He is much less the dabber and spontaneous painter of the brush. He relies rightly on the arabesque, with subdued modelling, giving her unusual powdered skin a truthful rendering that is faithful to nature. Once again, in a letter to his friend, "My portrait," he wrote to Castillo, "it is much changed and far more advanced than when you last saw it. One day I was dissatisfied with it, and dashed a tone of light rose over the former gloomy background. I turned the picture upside down, retired to the other end of the studio, and looked at it under my arm. Vast improvement. The élancé figure of the model shows to much greater advantage. The picture is framed and on a great easel, and Carolus has been to see it and said, 'You can send it to the Salon with confidence.' Encouraging, but false. I have made up my mind to be refused." Varnishing day did nothing to reassure the painter. On the opening day he was in a state of extreme nervousness. It was the 7th successive year in which he had exhibited. Every salon had seen the critics more favourable, the public more ready to applaud. The doors of the Salon were hardly open before the picture was damned. The public took it upon themselves to rail against the flagrant unfitness, judged by prevailing standards. The critics fell afoul of the execution. The Parisian public is always vocal and expressive. The Salon was in an uproar. A demand was made that the picture should be withdrawn. Here a distinguished artist was proclaiming to the public in paint a fact about herself which she had hitherto never made any attempt to conceal, one which had, indeed, formed about one of her many social assets. So, anticipating this, Sargent, before the exhibition was over, took it away himself. After remaining many years in his studio, it now figures as one of the glories of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. The critics fell into 3 divisions: those who exclaimed in pious horror at the décolletage, those who recognized the picture as evidence of modernity and applauded the artist's courage, and, lastly, those who condemned the picture for the monochrome colour of the flesh tints. despite all the commotion and jeering by some. Yet there were the artists, those who were aware of his genius and appreciated his skills. We have the account of the painter Marie Bashkirtseff.
Marie observes the work exhibited at the Salon and is quick to notice one in particular. She records, "There is also the portrait of the beautiful Madame by John Singer Sargent. It is a great success of curiosity. People find it atrocious. For me it is perfect painting, masterly and true. But he has done what he saw. The beautiful Madame is horrible in daylight, for she paints herself despite her 26 years. This chalky paint gives to the shoulders the tone of a corpse. Further, she paints her ears rose and her hair mahogany, and the eyebrows are traced in a dark mahogany colour, 2 thick lines."
Then we have writer Louis de Fourcault that recognizes the picture as a masterpiece, not only for the extreme serenity and rhythm of the lines, but for the summary it presents of the psychology of a professional beauty, who, if regarded and treated only as such by the world, ends by being less a woman than, as it were, a canon of worldly beauty, dressed, posed, and with her whole outlook adjusted to the supreme purpose of the role to which society has condemned her. That, indeed, is what the artist has achieved in this masterly portrait. Here, perhaps, in sheer beauty of line, he has approached as near to Ingres as at any time in his career. Sargent, who was now 28, had been working for 10 years in Paris. The Salon of 1884 was to have been a culmination of his efforts. He had painted what is now recognized as a masterpiece. It had been received with a storm of abuse. Paris, which had been approving and encouraging, had dealt a violent blow at its recognized favourite. He was not in the least in doubt about his art or talent, but he was always sensitive to atmosphere, always easily affected by an unsympathetic public. The fallout and the admiration were evenly divided, it seems. Artists and writers and attendees for the Salon were mesmerized by the enigma of the woman in black, with a strap loosely dropped from her shoulder. She most likely thought little of that aspect until a controversy began to emerge over the woman, a strap, and the painterly characterization displayed upon its showing. However, it was much later that, in retrospect, Gautreau would write to Sargent, and finally gave her appreciation of the great portrait that it was. Mr. Sargent was a prodigious worker, and during his entire life it was an exceptional thing for him to allow a day to go by without doing some work. For many years his habit was to work from about 9 in the morning until lunch at 1, and then again until the light failed in the afternoon. He went to his studio as a businessman goes to his office. His sisters tell of one occasion as an example of his ways. Once, when travelling in Italy, they went to a railway station and found the train was an hour or more late. Mr. Sargent at once unpacked his things, went outside and made, what has since become, a memorable sketch of 2 oxen that happened to be standing there. All through his life, when on a so-called vacation, and he could work as he wished, his preference took him into the open, where he made sketches, often in watercolour, whatever there happened to be. And so we leave you with the thought of Sargent, away from the confines of the studio, and to the other area of his expertise and great skill, that of the plein air picture, his painting of On His Holidays, Norway. Our presentation on the wonderful Madame X painting by Sargent was a worthy one for us to rediscover and share. Sargent shall return. We hope you enjoyed it, and we have many more great artworks coming in the future, so thank you to our subscribers. So until next time, bye for now.